This is Jeremy Tesmer with SGTV. Gallery owner Frank Goss and I have pulled together a beautiful and intriguing new exhibition from the estate of Betty Lane. Betty was born in Washington, D.C. in 1907 to an officer in the Marine Corps and a woman capable of managing the life of such a man. Her father made general while he was still fairly young, and the family moved to Santo Domingo, where General Rufus Lane took charge of the Department of Justice and Education in U.S.-occupied Dominica. At just 11 years old, young Betty Lane decided on her life's course from the shore of an island beach. In a memoir written at the end of her life, she would recall, "The tropical sky was full of stars, and, as I was already given to sky worship and solemn resolves, I made my decision to be an artist." What that was or how it was done, I wasn't quite sure, but I carved my name on a small tree early the next morning to make sure. When the family returned home to Falls Church just outside the capital, Betty grew up among national and world leaders. Her future was full of promise. She was the youngest daughter of a prominent family and quite pretty, but academic life didn't suit her. When she graduated from high school, she enrolled in classes at the Corcoran School where she studied music and took drawing. Eventually, she prevailed upon her parents to let her study at the Massachusetts Normal Art School, where she was able to draw and paint from a live model and study the works of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. Betty was at the top of her class, but she knew she had to get to Paris, where all of the serious art was happening. With funding from a cousin and her older sister as chaperone, Betty Lane left for the Montparnasse in Paris, where she would eventually find André Lotte. Behind the train station and up a back stairway, Betty learned everything she could about modern French painting. She learned about Cézanne's theory of structure, about how to build a painting from planes of color, and about the bold new theories of the Expressionists. It was a glorious time in her life. On her return to Washington, D.C., she was offered a solo exhibition at the Phillips Gallery in Washington, D.C. The local paper declared, "Betty Lane finds fame at 23. A year later, she married Gerald Noxon and moved to London, where she lived among writers, pioneering filmmakers, and artists. Around that time, she began to develop her own style, a style markedly different from that of her teacher. Her new sense of beauty was reductive, abstracted, and biomorphic. In 1936, Betty gave birth to her only son, Nicholas. 3 years later, Europe slid into war. Betty and her husband left for the English countryside, but were soon faced with the horrifying decision of whether to send their son home to America. In 1940, they put Nicky on a boat for the U.S. As the German Air Force began their bombing campaign against England, Betty and her husband left the country and returned home to the family home in Falls Church before heading up to Oakville, Canada, near Niagara Falls. In 1941, Betty Lane would have her first solo exhibition at Gallery Saint-Étienne in New York, a gallery that specializes in German expressionism and folk art. Her show at Gallery Saint-Étienne resulted in the sale of a painting called Blizzard to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, though the family continued to struggle financially. It simply didn't occur to Betty or her husband that her career might be worthy of real focus. She painted in the in-between hours, in between taking care of her son, her husband, the house, their friends, and everything else. Still, she found time to make gorgeous work. She exhibited, and life went on. Over the course of her life, her style evolved from an early French modern style reminiscent of Matisse to something vaguely surreal, to a vigorous expressionistic style reminiscent of Marsden Hartley, to a naive abstracted form somewhat like that of Stuart Davis, to a flattened, brushy, reductive style like that of Milton Avery. In the late 1940s, Betty Lane and her husband divorced, an unusual move for the time. A career that had always existed at the margins was now put on hiatus. She ended up taking a job teaching art at Miss Porter's School for Girls in Connecticut. She continued to paint, though, and her work continued to evolve. She painted those things around her, bringing wonderful color, design, and candor to her portraits, still lifes, and landscapes. Eventually, she was able to retire in Cape Cod, where she devoted herself to painting full-time. Betty Lane passed away in 1996. She was given a retrospective exhibition the next year by the Cape Cod Museum of Art called Painting a Life, and this year was accepted into the collection of the National Museum of Women in the Arts. Over the course of her life, she made good on the vow she made at just 11 years old, the vow to be an artist. It took a certain kind of woman to make such a choice, a woman we now call modern. She created a distinctive, beautiful, sophisticated vision of domestic life in America. A man of such ability might well be famous today, but Betty was born to a certain age when the art world was still a man's world. Betty Lane, A Certain Kind of Woman, will be on view through May 2nd. Come see it.